She can't love you like I do." The words hung in the air between them like shattered glass. Daniel froze in the doorway of her office, forgotten documents slipping from his hand. His boss, his brilliant, untouchable CEO, stood there trembling, mascara threatening to run, every wall she'd built over 2 years crumbling in 5 devastating words. But before he could even process what Evelyn had just confessed, she delivered the second blow that would change everything. In 4 days, she was leaving Chicago, forever. If you want to see how this impossible confession transforms 2 broken lives, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. The fluorescent lights of Hayes and Morrison architecture hummed their usual 11 p.m. song. That particular frequency of exhaustion that Daniel had memorized somewhere between his wife's funeral and his daughter's 4th birthday. He shouldn't have been here. Emma was home with Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who charged $20 an hour to watch Netflix on his couch, and he'd already burned through his pathetic excuse for a social life on a blind date that peaked when his coworker's cousin spent 45 minutes explaining her skincare routine. Daniel pushed through the glass doors anyway, because he'd left the Riverside Project files on his desk like an idiot. And tomorrow's presentation to the city council wouldn't build itself on good intentions and desperation. The 23rd floor was dark, except for one office. Of course it was hers. Evelyn Carter's corner office glowed like a lighthouse, and Daniel felt something twist in his chest. That same complicated knot that had been tightening for 2 years. The one he pretended was professional respect, and nothing more complicated than that. He could grab his files and leave. Should grab his files and leave. But his feet carried him toward her door instead, because that's what happened when you spent 24 months learning someone's patterns. Evelyn worked late every Monday. She ordered Thai food when stressed and barely touched it. She took her coffee black with exactly 1 sugar, and she noticed things about people that nobody else bothered to see. She'd noticed him when he was drowning, even when he'd gotten so good at pretending he wasn't. "You're supposed to be on a date." Evelyn didn't look up from her computer, but her fingers had stopped moving across the keyboard. She wore her glasses, the ones she only put on after everyone else went home. The ones that made her look less like the youngest CEO in Chicago's architecture scene, and more like the 30-year-old woman who'd built an empire on 4 hours of sleep and pure stubborn brilliance. It ended early. Daniel lingered in the doorway, half in her office and half ready to run. Just needed to grab the Riverside files. That bad? She was nice. That's what people say when there's nothing else to say. Evelyn finally looked at him, and Daniel had to remind himself that eye contact with your boss wasn't supposed to feel like falling. "Let me guess. Your coworker set it up. Probably mentioned you're a widower within the first 5 minutes. She spent the whole dinner either tiptoeing around it or trying too hard to prove she's okay with your baggage." Daniel's laugh came out hollow. She asked if Emma was dealing with the loss okay before we ordered appetizers. Jesus. Evelyn pulled off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. She looked exhausted, which meant she'd been here since 6 a.m. again, running on coffee and whatever drove people who refused to settle for good enough. "You want a drink? I've got whiskey in my desk that's too expensive to waste on feeling sorry for ourselves, but I'm willing to make an exception." This was dangerous. Daniel knew it was dangerous the same way he knew that standing in her office at 11 p.m. talking about failed dates and dead wives was several lines past appropriate, but he walked in anyway. Evelyn pulled out 2 glasses and a bottle of something that probably cost more than his car payment. "You didn't have to wait up," Daniel said, even though she obviously hadn't been waiting for him. She'd been doing what she always did, carrying the weight of 60 employees in a company she'd inherited from her father 5 years ago when everyone expected her to fail. "I wasn't waiting. I was working." She poured 2 fingers into each glass. "These are different things." "Are they?" Something flickered across her face. Too fast for Daniel to name, too raw for the woman who'd once fired a senior partner in the middle of a board meeting without her voice shaking. "How's Emma?" Evelyn asked instead of answering, because she always asked about Emma. She remembered that his daughter hated bananas but loved strawberries, that she was learning piano and struggling with fractions, that she had nightmares on Tuesdays for some reason nobody could figure out. "She made me watch Frozen again, 3rd time this week. Could be worse. Could be Caillou." "Don't speak that name in this office." Daniel accepted the glass she offered, their fingers brushing for half a second. Nothing meaningful, Nothing he should be cataloging in his memory like evidence of something that didn't exist. She asked why I got dressed up tonight. I told her I was meeting a friend. And what did she say? She asked if the friend was you. The silence that followed was loaded with everything they'd spent 2 years not saying. Evelyn took a long drink, and Daniel watched her throat work as she swallowed, hating himself a little for noticing. "Smart kid," Evelyn finally said. "Too smart. She told me I smile different when I talk about work." Daniel stared into his glass like the amber liquid might have answers. Which is insane because I'm usually complaining about impossible deadlines and clients who want Frank Lloyd Wright on a strip mall budget. Maybe she means you smile different when you talk about the people you work with. Maybe. The city sprawled below them, all glittering lights, and the kind of possibility that only existed at night when you were too tired to remember why dreams were supposed to be practical. Daniel had fallen in love with Chicago the same summer he'd met Sarah at a mutual friend's wedding. They'd built a life here, bought a too expensive condo in Lincoln Park, planned renovations they'd never finished, talked about Emma growing up in a neighborhood where they'd memorized the names of every dog at the park. Then Sarah's car got hit by a drunk driver on the Kennedy, and suddenly Daniel was learning to braid hair from YouTube videos and explaining to a 3-year-old why mommy wasn't coming home. Evelyn had been the one who'd found him having a panic attack in the supply closet 4 months later. She hadn't offered platitudes or awkward comfort. She just sat with him on the floor until he could breathe again, then handed him her bottle of water and said, "You're not okay, and that's okay, but you're also not alone, even when it feels like you are." He'd gone back to his desk after that and worked until dawn because focusing on CAD drawings was easier than focusing on the hole in his life where his wife used to be. Evelyn had left coffee on his desk every morning for 3 months after that, never said a word about it. Just black coffee with 1 sugar, which wasn't how he used to take it, but it was how he took it now, after watching her drink it the same way during countless late nights when they were the last people in the office. "So the date," Evelyn said, pulling Daniel back from memories he spent too much time living in. "You going to see her again?" She asked for a second date. I said I'd think about it. Which means no. Which means I don't know. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit Sarah used to tease him about. "Everyone keeps telling me I should try, that Emma needs a mother figure, that I can't stay alone forever. Everyone should mind their own business. They mean well. People always mean well when they're telling you how to live your life." Evelyn's voice had an edge now, something sharp beneath the professional control. "Did you like her? The woman from tonight?" "I don't know, maybe. She was nice," Evelyn finished. "You said that already." "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say something real." She was gripping her glass too tight, her knuckles white. "I want you to stop pretending that going through the motions of dating strangers is going to fix whatever you think is broken about your life." Daniel blinked. "Where's this coming from?" "I don't know." Evelyn stood abruptly, walking to the window like she couldn't stand to be sitting anymore. The Chicago skyline reflected in the glass, turning her into a silhouette against 1,000 lights. "Maybe I'm tired of watching you settle for nice when you deserve someone who actually sees you." "Evelyn, she can't love you like I do." The words detonated in the space between them. Daniel's brain stuttered, trying to process what he'd just heard, trying to make it make sense in the context of 2 years of carefully maintained professional boundaries and nothing but appropriate distance. "What?" His voice came out strangled. Evelyn turned from the window, and Daniel had never seen her look like this. Terrified and defiant at the same time, like she'd just jumped off a cliff and was still deciding whether to regret it. "I said she can't love you like I do." Her hands were shaking. "Nobody can because I've been watching you for 2 years, Daniel. I know how you take your coffee now, even though you used to drink it with cream. I know you skip lunch when you're stressed and work through migraines until you can't see straight. I know you leave every day at exactly 4:30 to pick up Emma from school, and you come back online at 9 p.m. after she's asleep to finish whatever you couldn't do during the day. I don't—" Daniel's mouth was dry. "I don't understand what's happening right now. I know you bought your wife's favorite flowers on your anniversary this year and left them at her grave. I know you still wear your wedding ring on a chain under your shirt because Emma gets upset when you wear it on your finger. I know you feel guilty every time you smile, like being happy is betraying her memory. Stop." The word came out harsh, defensive. "You can't just—" "I know you're lonely, Daniel. I know you think you're supposed to want someone nice who doesn't complicate your life. Someone who fits into the box everyone expects you to check off so you can prove you're moving on. Evelyn's voice cracked. But I also know that woman isn't going to understand why you need to work on Emma's birthday, because missing deadlines means letting down your team. She's not going to know that you reorganize your desk when you're anxious, or that you hum under your breath when you're concentrating, or that you've been holding yourself together with duct tape and denial for 3 years because you don't know how to fall apart when someone's depending on you. Daniel couldn't move, couldn't breathe. How long? He managed. Since the day you came back to work after the funeral. Evelyn laughed, but there was no humor in it. You walked into that meeting looking like you'd aged 10 years overnight, and you presented the Morrison project like nothing had changed, like your entire world hadn't just collapsed. Everyone was so impressed by how strong you were, how professional. I had to be. I know. That's what broke me. She wiped at her eyes angrily, like crying was a betrayal of her own control. Watching you hold it together when all I wanted to do was tell you that it was okay to fall apart, that you didn't have to be strong all the time, that someone saw how hard you were fighting just to survive each day. Why didn't you say anything? Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. Because you're my employee, because you were grieving, because I'm your boss and there's a power dynamic and 1,000 reasons why this is inappropriate and impossible. And she stopped, pressing her palm against the window like she needed something solid to hold on to. And because I convinced myself that what I felt for you would go away if I just ignored it long enough. Did it? No. Evelyn turned back to face him, and her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. It got worse. Every time you stayed late to help someone else meet their deadline. Every time you defended your team in meetings when clients were being unreasonable. Every time you showed up exhausted and still found a way to smile at the receptionist and ask about her son's baseball game. You're good, Daniel. Not nice. Good. There's a difference. Daniel set down his glass before he dropped it. His hands were shaking. I don't know what to do with this, he admitted. You don't have to do anything. Evelyn took a shuddering breath. I couldn't watch you go on another date and pretend I was fine with it. I couldn't keep pretending that I haven't been in love with you for 2 years while you settle for someone who'll never know you the way I do. This is insane. Daniel was pacing now, his mind racing through every interaction they'd ever had, reframing every moment through this new impossible lens. You're my boss. I work for you. Emma, my daughter, she's 6 years old and I'm barely keeping my life together. And you're talking about what? What are you talking about? I don't know. Evelyn's voice broke. I don't have a plan, Daniel. For once in my life, I don't have a strategy or a 5-year forecast or a backup option. I just know I'm standing here in my office at 11 p.m. telling you that I'm in love with you, and in 4 days I'm supposed to get on a plane to Boston. The room tilted. What? Boston. Evelyn's laugh was bitter. The board approved the expansion project. They want me to oversee the opening of our second office, build the team, establish our presence on the East Coast. It's everything I've been working toward for 3 years. When were you going to tell me? I got the approval yesterday. I was going to announce it to the senior team tomorrow. She met his eyes. You would have been the first to know if I'd told you before the official announcement, and I couldn't. I couldn't look at you and pretend this was just business. Daniel's mind was spinning. Evelyn was leaving. His boss was leaving. The company was expanding, and also apparently she'd been in love with him for 2 years, while he'd been too buried in survival mode to notice. How long will you be gone? Minimum 2 years. Maybe longer if the expansion goes well. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself. I wasn't going to tell you how I felt. I was going to get on that plane and let you live your life and find someone nice who doesn't come with complications and a cross-country career that makes a relationship impossible. Then why did you? Because you came back here tonight smelling like someone else's perfume, talking about another date, and I realized I was out of time. She looked at him like she was memorizing him. I spent 2 years being professional and appropriate and putting your well-being before my feelings, and I have 4 days left before I leave, and I couldn't let you go without telling you that someone sees you, Daniel, really sees you. Not the widower everyone tiptoes around, not the struggling single father, just you. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid and everything now spoken. Daniel should leave, should grab his files and walk out and process this somewhere other than her office where the smell of her perfume and the whiskey were making it hard to think straight. Instead, he asked, "How do you take your coffee?" Evelyn blinked. "What?" "Your coffee. How do you take it?" "Black. 1 sugar, you know that." "When did you start taking it that way?" She hesitated. "I don't remember." "Yes, you do." A pause, then quietly. "6 months after you came back from bereavement leave. You were drinking it black because you said you didn't have time to mess with cream and sugar anymore, and I—" She stopped. "You started drinking it the same way," Daniel finished. "It's just coffee." "Is it?" He took a step closer. "What about the Thai food you order and never eat? You used to get Italian." "I don't." Emma's allergic to peanuts. Thai food is safer for cross-contamination in a shared office kitchen. Daniel's heart was hammering. "You changed what you ordered so she wouldn't be at risk on the days I brought her by after school." Evelyn looked away. "That's just being considerate." "When's my birthday?" "Daniel, when is it?" "March 14th. "What time was I born?" 2:23 p.m. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. "You mentioned it once during a team lunch. You were complaining about daylight savings, and you said at least you were born in the afternoon, so you never had to wonder if you were born before or after the clocks changed." "I said that 2 years ago." "I remember." Daniel stood in the middle of her office, surrounded by the evidence of Evelyn's success, the awards on her walls, the architectural models of buildings she'd brought into existence through sheer force of will, the framed photo of her father at the company's 25th anniversary before cancer took him 6 months later. She'd inherited this company at 25, and everyone expected her to fail. Instead, she doubled their revenue and earned respect in an industry that didn't like giving it to women who looked like they should still be in college. And apparently, she'd spent 2 years falling in love with her grieving project manager while pretending it wasn't happening. "I don't know what I'm feeling right now," Daniel said honestly. My brain isn't working." "I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" Evelyn pressed her fingers against her eyes. "You should go home. Emma needs you, and I need to prepare for tomorrow's announcement, and we both need to pretend this conversation never happened." "Is that what you want?" "It doesn't matter what I want." "Yes, it does." Daniel surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. "You just told me you've been in love with me for 2 years. You don't get to take it back and pretend it doesn't matter." "What do you want me to say, Daniel? That I'm hoping you'll suddenly realize you've been in love with me too? That you'll ask me not to go to Boston and we'll figure out how to make this work despite every ethical and professional reason why we shouldn't?" Her voice was sharp with pain. "I'm not that naive." "I didn't say you were." "Then what are you saying?" Daniel didn't have an answer. How could he? When he was still processing the fact that the woman he'd spent 2 years carefully not thinking about in any context beyond professional had just detonated every boundary between them? "I need time," he said finally. "I need to think." "You have 4 days." Evelyn's smile was sad. "Then I'm gone, and this becomes a complicated conversation that's easier to never have." Evelyn, go home, Daniel. Hug your daughter. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we're both going to walk into that office and be professional, and I'm going to announce the expansion, and you're going to congratulate me like a good colleague, and maybe if we're both really strong, we'll survive this without imploding. She was right. She was absolutely right. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to leave right now and never speak of this again. But Daniel couldn't make his feet move. "What if I don't want to pretend it never happened?" The words escaped before he could stop them. Evelyn's expression cracked open, showing everything she was trying to hide. "Then we're both in trouble, because I've spent 2 years building walls between us, and you just knocked them all down in one sentence." Maybe they needed to come down, or maybe they were protecting us both from something that can't work. She moved toward her desk, putting distance between them like physical space could restore the boundaries they'd just obliterated. "You're a single father with a 6-year-old daughter who needs stability. I'm your boss who's about to move 1,200 miles away for a job that's going to consume the next 2 years of my life minimum. Even if we both wanted this, which I'm not saying you do, it would be impossible." "Since when do you back down from impossible?" "Since the cost of failure is losing you completely." Evelyn's voice broke on the last word. If we try this and it doesn't work, I don't just lose whatever this could have been. I lose the person who makes me feel less alone in a job that's lonely by design. I lose the only man who's looked at me in 2 years and seen a person instead of a CEO or a networking opportunity or my father's daughter. Daniel's chest ached. I see you. I know, that's the problem. She managed a weak smile. You see me, and I see you, and we're standing in my office at midnight talking about feelings like we're teenagers instead of adults who should know better. Adults who should know better would have walked away from this conversation 10 minutes ago. Probably. Are you going to walk away? Evelyn looked at him across the distance of her office, and Daniel saw every emotion she'd spent 2 years hiding. I don't know how to do this halfway. If I let myself love you out loud instead of in secret, I'm not going to be able to stop. And when I leave for Boston, it's going to destroy me. Then don't leave. You don't mean that. Don't tell me what I mean. Daniel crossed the space between them in 3 strides. You just spent 10 minutes telling me how well you know me. Don't pretend you can't see that I'm terrified right now because everything I thought I understood about my life just shifted. And I don't know how to process it, but I know I don't want you to get on a plane in 4 days without figuring out what this is. Daniel, you said that woman from tonight can't love me like you do. Okay, maybe you're right, but you also can't love me from Boston. So what are you suggesting? That I turn down the opportunity I've been working toward for 3 years? That I sacrifice my career for a relationship that might not even work? Evelyn's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I can't ask you to wait for me, and I can't ask myself to give up everything I've built. I'm not asking you to give up anything. Daniel's mind was racing, trying to find a solution to an equation that didn't balance. I'm just asking for 4 days. 4 days to figure out if this thing between us is real, or if we're both just lonely and confusing proximity for connection. I've known for 2 years that what I feel for you is real, and I've spent 2 years in survival mode not letting myself feel anything beyond getting through each day. Daniel's voice dropped. But I remember every coffee you left on my desk. I remember you defending me to clients when they questioned my judgment. I remember you covering my afternoon meetings the day Emma had her tonsils out, even though you had a pitch to prepare. That's just being a decent boss. Is it? He searched her face. Or was it you finding excuses to take care of me when I wouldn't take care of myself? Evelyn looked away. This is a bad idea. Probably. We could both get hurt. We're already hurting. Daniel realized it as he said it. I've been hurting for 3 years, and you've been hurting while watching me hurt, and maybe we're both tired of pretending we're fine. And what about Emma? You can't just... She's been through enough, Daniel. She doesn't need the instability of her father dating his boss who's about to move across the country. You're right. The acknowledgement hurt. She comes first. She always comes first. Then we're back where we started. They stood there in the heavy silence, and Daniel felt the weight of impossibility pressing down on them. Every logical reason why this couldn't work was valid. Every professional boundary they'd be crossing was real. Every risk was worth considering. But standing there in Evelyn's office, looking at the woman who'd noticed when he needed coffee before he asked, who'd protected his career when he was too exhausted to protect it himself, who'd fallen in love with him quietly while giving him space to grieve. Daniel realized something had been building between them for 2 years, and one confession couldn't make it disappear just because the timing was terrible. What if... Daniel started, then stopped, afraid to voice what he was thinking. What if what? What if we do this honestly? No games, no pretending it's just professional. 4 days. We talk, we figure out what this is, and then you get on that plane to Boston, and we both know where we stand. And if we realize we want to try, then what? Long distance with a 6-year-old in the mix and your boss is your girlfriend? Evelyn shook her head. That's not a relationship. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Maybe, or maybe... Daniel hesitated, then decided he'd already destroyed every boundary tonight. Maybe you're worth the risk. The words hung in the air between them. Evelyn's breath caught. You can't say things like that when you don't know what you're feeling yet. I know I'm feeling something. I've been feeling it for months and telling myself it was gratitude or professional respect or anything except what it actually is. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. I know that when you smile at me during meetings, my whole day gets better. I know I work late on Mondays because that's when you're here. I know Emma asks about you more than she asks about anyone else from my work, And I think it's because she hears how I talk about you when I don't realize I'm doing it. Daniel, stop. I know my wife died 3 years ago, and I loved her more than anything, and I thought I'd never feel like this again. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm confused and lonely, and you're the first person in years who's made me feel seen, and I'm mistaking that for something more. And if you are? Then we figure it out in 4 days, and you go to Boston, and I stay here, and we both move on. Daniel met her eyes. But if I'm not wrong, if this is real, then we deserve to know before you leave. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel saw her fighting with herself, saw the professional CEO warring with the woman who'd just confessed 2 years of hidden feelings. 4 days, she finally whispered. 4 days. And then I'm getting on that plane regardless of what we figure out. The company needs this expansion, and I can't be the CEO who throws away a crucial opportunity because of a relationship. I wouldn't ask you to. Promise me. Evelyn's voice was fierce. Promise me that you won't ask me to choose between my career and this. That whatever happens, you'll support the decision I've already made. The words stuck in Daniel's throat because he wanted to ask her not to go, wanted to beg her to stay in Chicago, to build this thing between them without the complication of distance and time zones and an impossible situation. But looking at her, at the woman who'd clawed her way to the top of an industry that hadn't wanted to make room for her, who'd proven herself over and over again just to be taken seriously, Daniel knew he couldn't be one more person asking her to be smaller than she was. I promise, he said, meaning it. Boston isn't optional. I understand that. Okay. Evelyn's shoulders sagged slightly, like she'd been braced for a fight. Okay. So we have 4 days to figure out what this is without sabotaging both our futures in the process. Starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow. She glanced at her watch. Which is technically in 6 hours, so you should probably go home before we make any more questionable decisions tonight. Daniel knew she was right, knew he should grab his files and leave before they crossed any more lines that couldn't be uncrossed. But he couldn't resist asking, what would you do differently if we had more than 4 days? Evelyn's smile was sad and soft at the same time. I'd take you to dinner somewhere that isn't a Thai restaurant making safety accommodations for your daughter's allergies. I'd ask about your favorite books and your worst subject in school and whether you actually like architecture or if you just fell into it. I'd want to know everything about you that I don't already know, which is probably less than I think because I've been paying attention even when I shouldn't have been. What's my worst subject in school? History. You mentioned it once when we were touring the Morrison site. The client was talking about historical preservation, and you made a joke about barely passing History 101 because you kept mixing up dates. Daniel's laugh was real this time. You're a little scary when you do that. Remember things you said once 2 years ago? Yeah. Imagine how I feel living with this brain. Evelyn's expression softened. Go home, Daniel. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we're going to be professionals who work together, and then tomorrow night we're going to have dinner somewhere and actually talk without whiskey and midnight confessions making everything more dramatic than it needs to be. Is that a date? It's a conversation. She paused. That might also be a date. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Daniel finally moved toward the door, grabbing his forgotten files from where they'd fallen earlier. At the threshold, he turned back. Evelyn? Yeah? For what it's worth, I'm glad you told me, even if it makes everything more complicated. Her smile was worth every complication. Me too. Daniel left her office and walked through the empty building, his mind racing with everything that had just happened. 4 days to figure out if what he'd been feeling for months was real. 4 days to see if the woman who'd been his anchor through the worst years of his life could be something more. 4 days before she left for Boston and changed everything. He rode the elevator down 23 floors and stepped out into the Chicago night, the cold air hitting his face like a wake-up call. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. Emma's asleep. See you soon. Normal life, says simple life, the life he'd built for his daughter where everything was predictable and safe. And now Evelyn Carter had walked into it. Or maybe she'd been there all along, and he'd just been too busy surviving to notice. And nothing felt simple anymore. Daniel walked to his car, the city lights blurring around him, and thought about coffee with 1 sugar and Thai food orders, and the way Evelyn looked at him like he wasn't broken. 4 days. Either it would be enough to change everything, or it would be just enough time to break both their hearts before distance made the choice for them. He started the car and drove home through empty streets, and for the first time in 3 years, Daniel Hayes let himself imagine a future that wasn't just about surviving until tomorrow, even if that future came with an expiration date 4 days away. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch when Daniel got home, some reality show playing on mute. He paid her double the usual rate because guilt was easier than explanation, then stood in Emma's doorway watching his daughter sleep with her stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. She looked so much like Sarah sometimes it hurt to breathe. Daniel sat on the edge of Emma's bed, careful not to wake her, and tried to reconcile the father he'd been 3 hours ago with whoever he was now. That version of himself had gone on a forgettable date with a nice woman and planned to grab some files. This version had left Evelyn Carter's office with his entire understanding of the past 2 years rewritten. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was sleep-soft and confused. "Hey, baby. Just checking on you. Did your friend make you happy?" She rubbed her eyes, squinting at him in the dim glow from her nightlight. Daniel's throat tightened. "What makes you think my friend made me happy?" "You look different," Emma yawned. "Less tired." Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds came observations that landed like punches. Daniel kissed her forehead and tucked the blanket around her shoulders. "Go back to sleep, Em." "Is she nice? Your friend?" "Yeah, she's nice." "Good." Emma was already drifting off again. "You should have more nice friends." Daniel sat there for another 10 minutes after Emma fell back asleep, trying to quiet his brain enough to function. He had a presentation in 6 hours. Had to shower and prep and walk into that office like a professional who definitely hadn't spent midnight in his CEO's office having a conversation that violated approximately 17 different workplace policies. He made it to his own bedroom and lasted 45 minutes staring at the ceiling before giving up on sleep entirely. The thing was, Evelyn wasn't wrong about any of it. Daniel had noticed her noticing him, had caught himself looking forward to Monday nights when the office was empty except for the two of them, had started drinking his coffee black after watching her do it, telling himself it was about efficiency when really it was about shared rituals he didn't want to examine too closely. And yeah, maybe he'd been so buried in grief and single parenthood that he'd convinced himself it was professional respect and nothing more complicated than that. But sitting alone in his bedroom at 2 a.m., Daniel couldn't pretend he didn't know what Emma meant when she said he smiled different talking about work. He smiled different because of Evelyn. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number that Daniel somehow knew was her before he even opened it. "I can't sleep either. This is my personal number. You don't have to respond. Just wanted you to know you're not the only one whose brain won't shut up." Daniel stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. "What are you thinking about?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. How I spent 2 years convincing myself I was being professional when really I was just a coward. "You're not a coward. I let you go on dates with other women because I was too scared to tell you how I felt." That's the definition of coward. Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Everything he wanted to say felt too big for a text message at 2 in the morning. "You want to know what I'm thinking about?" he typed instead. "Tell me." "How you remembered when Emma got her tonsils out. How you covered my meetings without me asking. How you've been taking care of me for 2 years and I was too much of a mess to see it. You weren't a mess. You were surviving. Same thing." "No, it's not." Daniel closed his eyes, holding the phone against his chest like it was something more than metal and glass. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Me either. That's not reassuring." "I know, but at least we're both equally terrified." A laugh escaped him, rusty and real. When was the last time he'd laughed at 2 a.m.? When was the last time he'd wanted to? "Go to sleep, Daniel. Tomorrow's going to be weird enough without both of us showing up running on no sleep and bad decisions." Is that what this is? Bad decisions? The dots appeared and disappeared 3 times before her response came through. "I don't know yet. Ask me again in 4 days." Daniel fell asleep with his phone still in his hand, and for the first time in 3 years, he didn't dream about the accident. The morning announcement went exactly how Evelyn said it would. She called the senior team into the conference room at 9 a.m. sharp, looking like she'd slept 8 hours and had her life completely together. Daniel knew better now. Could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped her coffee mug a fraction too tight. "Boston expansion is approved," she said without preamble, pulling up architectural renderings on the screen. We break ground in 6 weeks. I'll be relocating to oversee the project personally. Timeline is 2 years minimum, potentially longer depending on client acquisition and team building. The room exploded with congratulations and questions. Daniel sat there trying to look appropriately surprised while his coffee went cold in his hands. Marcus Chen, their lead designer, was already asking about staffing. You taking any of us with you? Building local talent primarily, but I'll need someone senior to help establish our standards. Evelyn's eyes didn't land on Daniel, which somehow felt more obvious than if she'd stared directly at him. We'll discuss individual opportunities over the next week. When do you leave? Asked Jennifer from accounting. Friday. 4 days. The timeline they'd agreed on last night suddenly felt real in a way it hadn't at midnight in her office. The meeting dissolved into logistics and speculation. Daniel escaped as soon as professionally possible, heading back to his desk where the Riverside project files sat exactly where he'd left them before his life got complicated. He made it until lunch before Evelyn appeared at his cubicle. Conference room 3, 5 minutes. Her voice was perfectly professional, her expression giving away nothing. Daniel found her waiting with the door already closed, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline like she was memorizing it. That was brutal, she said without turning around. You were very convincing. I've had practice pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Evelyn finally looked at him, and the professional mask slipped enough for Daniel to see the exhaustion underneath. You okay? Honestly? No idea. Daniel leaned against the conference table. You? About the same. She managed a weak smile. So, dinner tonight. Actual conversation. You still want to do this? Do you? I asked you first. That's not an answer, Evelyn. She crossed her arms, that defensive gesture Daniel had seen her use in difficult client meetings. I've wanted to have dinner with you for 2 years, but wanting something and it being a good idea are very different things. Since when do you back down from things just because they're not good ideas? Since the risk is losing the only person at this company who makes me feel like a human being instead of a revenue generator. The words came out sharp, honest. You want the truth? I'm terrified. I told myself last night that 4 days was enough time to figure this out, but now it's real and I don't know what I'm doing. Daniel understood that feeling intimately. We don't have to do dinner. We can just... No. Evelyn cut him off. We're doing this. I didn't spend 2 years being a coward just to chicken out now that it actually matters. You keep calling yourself a coward. You're literally the bravest person I know. Running a company isn't brave. It's just work. She looked at him with something raw in her expression. Being honest about feelings? That's terrifying. Tell me about it. They stood there in the conference room, the city sprawling below them, and Daniel felt the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. 7 o'clock, Evelyn said finally. There's a place in West Loop, Italian. Nothing fancy, no one from work goes there. We can talk without performing for an audience. Emma's got piano at 5:30. I can probably make 7 if Mrs. Chen can stay late. Bring her. Daniel blinked. What? Emma. Bring her. Evelyn's voice was steady, but her eyes were nervous. If we're doing this honestly, she's part of your life. She should know that I'm not just your boss who asks about her homework. Evelyn, Daniel tried to find words for how big that offer was. You don't have to do that. I want to. Unless you don't think it's appropriate, which I'd understand because this whole situation is basically a masterclass in inappropriate. She asks about you. The admission slipped out before Daniel could stop it. When I get home from work. She asks if I saw you, what you said, if you seemed happy. Evelyn's expression softened. She does? Last week she told me you seemed sad and asked if someone was being mean to you at work. Daniel laughed, but it came out unsteady. I told her you were just tired. She said I should bring you cookies to make you feel better. Did you? No. Because I'm an idiot who spent 2 years not noticing that my 6-year-old daughter was more emotionally intelligent than I was. You weren't an idiot. You were grieving. Can't I be both? Evelyn moved closer, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that he'd memorized without meaning to. Bring her to dinner. We'll make it casual. Just 3 people eating pasta and having a conversation. 3 people including a 6-year-old who's going to ask you 30 questions and spill marinara sauce on something. I survived board meetings with venture capitalists. I think I can handle dinner with a first grader. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to protect Emma from the complication of whatever this was becoming, but he also knew Evelyn was right. If they were going to figure out what existed between them, Emma couldn't be edited out of the equation. Okay, he said. 7 o'clock. West Loop. Fair warning, though, she's going to monopolize the conversation. Good. Then we can hide behind discussing her favorite Disney movie instead of having another midnight confession situation. You regret last night? The question hung between them. No, Evelyn said quietly. I regret that it took me 2 years to be honest, but I don't regret telling you. Even though it makes everything complicated, especially because it makes everything complicated. She checked her watch. I have a call with the Boston team in 10 minutes. You should get back to Riverside before someone notices we've been in here too long. Daniel moved toward the door, then stopped. Hey, Evelyn? Yeah? Thank you for wanting to meet Emma. That means something. Her smile was small but real. She's important to you. That makes her important to me. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of CAD drawings and client emails that Daniel couldn't focus on properly. His mind kept circling back to Evelyn's office, to her confession, to the impossible situation they'd created by being honest. At 4:30, he left to pick up Emma from school like he did every day, and she bounced into the car chattering about her friend Sophie's birthday party, and how her teacher said she was getting really good at multiplication. Daddy, can we get McDonald's? Not tonight, baby. We're having dinner with someone. Emma's eyes went wide. Is it your friend, the one from last night? Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, Miss Carter from my work. You remember her, right? The pretty lady who brought me the coloring book when I visited your office. That had been 8 months ago when Emma's school had an unexpected closure and Daniel had no backup childcare. Evelyn had cleared her afternoon calendar without being asked, set Emma up in the conference room with activities, and later that night texted Daniel a photo she'd taken of Emma's drawing with the caption, "She's talented. Must get it from her dad's side." That's her, Daniel confirmed. She wants to have dinner with us. Italian food. You okay with that? Is she your girlfriend? The question nearly made Daniel run a red light. What? No, she's my boss, Em. We work together. But you like her. It wasn't a question. You get happy when you talk about her. Daniel pulled into a parking spot near Emma's piano teacher's apartment and turned to look at his daughter. When had she gotten so observant? When had he become so obvious? It's complicated, he said finally. That's what grown-ups say when the answer is yes, but they don't want to admit it. Who taught you that? Sophie's mom. She says it about Sophie's dad all the time. Daniel made a mental note to have fewer conversations within Emma's hearing range. Miss Carter is someone I care about, but she's also my boss and she's moving to Boston for work, and we're just having dinner to talk. That's all. Okay. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt, apparently satisfied with that non-answer. Can I wear my blue dress? It's just dinner, baby. You don't need to get fancy. But she's pretty, and I want to look nice too. Something in Daniel's chest cracked open. Okay, blue dress it is. Piano lesson lasted 45 minutes, during which Daniel sat in the waiting area and tried not to spiral. This was insane. He was taking his 6-year-old daughter to dinner with his boss, who'd confessed to being in love with him less than 24 hours ago. There was no version of this situation that wasn't a spectacularly bad idea. But when Emma emerged from her lesson beaming because she'd finally mastered the piece she'd been struggling with, Daniel thought about Evelyn remembering her peanut allergy and buying her a coloring book and asking about her homework. Maybe this wasn't about being smart or safe. Maybe it was about letting someone into their life who'd already been there all along. They went home to change, and Daniel spent too long staring at his closet trying to figure out what you wore to dinner with your boss/potential, whatever, that also involved your first grader. He settled on jeans and a button-down that Sarah had bought him 4 years ago, then immediately changed shirts because wearing something his dead wife had picked felt like bringing a ghost to dinner. Emma appeared in her blue dress with her hair in pigtails that Daniel had managed without too many bumps. Do I look okay, Daddy? You look beautiful, baby. Do you look okay? Daniel laughed despite himself. I don't know, do I? Emma studied him seriously. You look nervous. I am nervous. Why? It's just dinner. If only it were that simple. They arrived at the restaurant at 7:03, which meant Daniel had spent 3 minutes circling the block trying to find parking while his heart attempted to exit his body through his throat. The place was exactly what Evelyn had described: small, warm, busy enough for privacy, but not so crowded you couldn't hear yourself think. Evelyn was already there, sitting in a corner booth wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look less like a CEO and more like someone Daniel might have met at a coffee shop and spent the rest of his life thinking about. She stood when she saw them, and Daniel watched her nervous energy transform into something genuine when Emma ran up to her. "Hi, Miss Carter." "Hi, Emma. Wow, I love your dress." "Thank you. Daddy let me pick it special." Emma climbed into the booth without any of the shyness Daniel had worried about. "Are you really moving to Boston?" Evelyn shot Daniel a look, surprised but not upset. "I am, for work." "That's far away." "It is." "Are you sad about leaving?" "Emma?" Daniel intervened gently. "Maybe we should look at the menu." "It's okay." Evelyn's voice was quiet. "Yeah, Emma, I'm sad about leaving. Chicago is my home." "Then why are you going?" "Because sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices for their jobs." Emma considered this seriously. "My daddy makes hard choices too. He gets sad sometimes, but he pretends he doesn't because he thinks I don't notice." Daniel wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. Evelyn's expression softened. "Your dad is really good at his job, and he's a really good dad. That's a lot of hard choices all at once." "I know." Emma opened her menu, apparently done with the heavy conversation. "Do they have spaghetti?" Dinner was easier than Daniel expected, and harder in different ways. Emma dominated the conversation exactly like he'd predicted, telling Evelyn about school and piano and her friend Sophie's elaborate birthday party plans. Evelyn listened like Emma was the most interesting person in the restaurant, asking follow-up questions and laughing at 6-year-old jokes that weren't remotely funny. Daniel watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. When Emma excused herself to the bathroom, carefully pronouncing it, "I need to use the restroom," like the little adult she was becoming, Evelyn turned to Daniel with something vulnerable in her eyes. "She's amazing. She's a handful. She's perceptive and funny, and she clearly adores you. The feeling's mutual." Daniel pushed pasta around his plate. "Sorry about the interrogation." "Are you kidding? That was the most honest conversation I've had in weeks." Evelyn smiled, but there was sadness underneath it. "She's right, about you pretending you're not sad." "I'm not sad right now." "No?" "Right now I'm terrified and confused and about 6 other emotions I can't name, but sad isn't one of them." Evelyn's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching his. "Is this okay? Dinner? All of it?" "I don't know yet." Daniel looked at her hand, so close to his. "But I want to find out." Emma returned before Evelyn could respond, and the rest of dinner passed in a blur of dessert negotiations and Emma's increasingly elaborate questions about Boston. By the time they paid the bill, Evelyn insisted, Daniel protested. Evelyn won. It was past Emma's bedtime and she was drooping against Daniel's shoulder. "I should get her home," Daniel said, standing with Emma half asleep in his arms. Evelyn walked them out to the parking lot, and Daniel tried not to think about how much this felt like something normal, something real. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn said softly. "Both of you. Thank you for inviting us." Daniel shifted Emma's weight. It was good." "Yeah, it was." Evelyn looked like she wanted to say more, but Emma stirred, and Daniel's moment was filled with the logistics of car seats and seatbelts. He got Emma settled and closed the door, turning back to find Evelyn standing closer than before. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Just us this time. Actual conversation without a 6-year-old referee." "She liked you." "I liked her too." Evelyn's smile was soft. "But tomorrow I want to talk to you, really talk, about all the things we didn't say last night." Daniel's pulse kicked up. Okay. She stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. "Drive safe. Text me when you get home." It wasn't until Daniel was halfway back to his apartment that he realized they'd just had a normal dinner like normal people, and it hadn't felt wrong or inappropriate or impossible. It had felt right. Emma woke up enough during the drive to ask, "Do you love Miss Carter, Daddy?" Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel. "That's a complicated question, baby." "No, it's not. You either do or you don't. When you're older, you'll understand that sometimes love is more complicated than yes or no. Mom wouldn't be mad if you loved someone else. She told me that." The car swerved slightly before Daniel corrected. "What?" "Before she died. She told me that if anything happened to her, I should make sure you didn't stay sad forever, that it was okay to be happy again." Daniel's vision blurred. He pulled over into a random parking lot because driving while crying wasn't safe, and Emma was looking at him with Sarah's eyes. "When did she tell you that?" "I don't remember. I was really little, but I remember what she said." Emma reached forward from her car seat and patted his shoulder. "It's okay to love Miss Carter, Daddy. Mom said so." Daniel sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes, crying while his 6-year-old daughter comforted him, and wondered when she'd gotten wise enough to give him permission he didn't know he needed. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel texted Evelyn, "We made it home safe. Emma says you're nice, and she hopes you like Boston." The response came fast. "Tell her I said thank you, and that I'm sorry I won't be around to hear her piano recital when she masters that piece she's working on. How did you know about her recital? You mentioned it 3 weeks ago. You were stressed about finding time to practice with her between projects." Daniel stared at his phone. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you tell me, Daniel. That's kind of my problem." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he sent what he was thinking instead. "Emma asked if I love you." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared 4 times. "What did you tell her? That it's complicated, is it?" Daniel thought about Evelyn listening to Emma talk about multiplication tables like it mattered. Thought about 2 years of coffee and covered meetings, and noticing when he needed support before he asked. Thought about how his daughter had just given him permission to move forward with a woman Sarah had never met. "Maybe it's not as complicated as I thought," he typed. "Maybe I've been making it complicated because simple feels too scary. And now I'm still scared. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel something when I clearly do." "What do you feel?" Daniel closed his eyes. "I feel like I've been half asleep for 3 years and you've been trying to wake me up without pushing too hard. I feel like my daughter sees something I've been too afraid to admit. I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something and I don't know if jumping is brave or stupid. What if it's both? Then I guess we figure it out together." 3 more days, Evelyn sent. 3 more days, Daniel agreed. He fell asleep thinking about Italian dinners and pigtails, and the way Evelyn had looked at Emma like she mattered. And for the first time since Sarah's funeral, Daniel let himself imagine a future that included someone else. Even if that future had an expiration date stamped on it in Boston-shaped letters. The next morning brought rain, that particular Chicago kind that felt personal, like the city was trying to make a point. Daniel sat through the project meeting, barely hearing Marcus present the updated Morrison renderings, his mind stuck on the text conversation from last night that had kept him awake until 3 a.m. Evelyn sat at the head of the table looking perfectly composed, asking pointed questions about structural load and timeline compression, and Daniel wondered if anyone else could see the tension in her jaw, or if 2 years of observation had made him fluent in reading her tells. When the meeting ended, she caught his eye for half a second before looking away. Daniel made it back to his desk before his phone buzzed. Lunch. That sandwich place on Franklin. Noon. Not a question. He typed back anyway. What if I have plans? Do you? No. Then see you at noon. The sandwich place was crowded enough for privacy, everyone too focused on their own lunch breaks to notice 2 coworkers sitting in a corner booth. Evelyn was already there when Daniel arrived, picking at a salad she clearly had no intention of eating. You look tired, she said instead of hello. Couldn't sleep. Yeah, me either. Evelyn pushed the salad away. I keep replaying last night. Emma asking if you love me, you telling her it's complicated. It is complicated. Daniel, I'm leaving in 3 days. If we're going to have an honest conversation about what this is, we need to stop hiding behind it's complicated and actually talk. Daniel sat down across from her, the table feeling like both a barrier and the only thing keeping him grounded. Okay, what do you want to talk about? What happens after Friday? The question landed heavy between them. I don't know, Daniel admitted. You get on a plane, you go to Boston, you build an empire, or whatever it is you do when you're not here. And you? I stay here, raise Emma, work on projects, try to figure out what I'm supposed to do with the fact that my boss just completely rewired how I understand the last 2 years of my life. Evelyn flinched. I didn't mean to rewire anything. I couldn't watch you date someone else and keep pretending I was fine with it. I know. Daniel leaned forward. But now I'm sitting here trying to figure out what's real and what's just, I don't know, proximity? Loneliness? Me projecting because you've been kind to me when I needed it? Is that what you think this is? I don't know what to think. 2 days ago, you were my boss, someone I respected and maybe had some feelings for that I'd shoved down so far I could pretend they didn't exist. Now you're telling me you've been in love with me for 2 years, and I'm trying to catch up, and I don't know if what I'm feeling is real or if I'm just responding because someone finally saw me. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. What did you feel last night? At dinner? Terrified. Besides terrified. Daniel thought about Emma in her blue dress, chattering about piano. Thought about Evelyn listening like it mattered, asking questions that showed she'd been paying attention to his daughter's life through throwaway comments Daniel had made months ago. I felt like we fit, he said quietly. The three of us. Like it wasn't forced or awkward, it was just right. And that scared me more than anything because right feels impossible when you're leaving in 3 days. What if I wasn't leaving? Don't do that. Daniel's voice came out sharper than he intended. Don't create hypotheticals that aren't real. You are leaving. You should leave. This expansion is everything you've worked for, and I'm not going to be the reason you give it up. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking what you'd want if the circumstances were different. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, frustration building. Why does that matter? The circumstances aren't different. You're leaving Friday, and I'm staying here and creating some fantasy version where that's not true doesn't help either of us. It helps me know if this is worth fighting for. Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. Because if you tell me that without Boston in the equation, you'd want to try this, then I know it's real. That it's not just me feeling something you're only responding to because I said it first. You think I'm just being polite? Daniel almost laughed. Evelyn, I spent last night lying awake trying to figure out when I fell for you, and the honest answer is, I don't know. Maybe it was the first time you left coffee on my desk. Maybe it was when you sat with me in that supply closet and didn't try to fix me. Maybe it was watching you with Emma last night, seeing you care about her because she matters to me. Then what's the problem? The problem is that wanting something and being able to have it are different things. Daniel kept his voice low but intense. The problem is I have a 6-year-old daughter who just lost her mother 3 years ago, and I can't drag her into a relationship that's doomed from the start because of distance and timing and every logical reason why this won't work. So you're giving up before we even try. I'm being realistic. No. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes fierce. You're being scared. Which I get, Daniel, because I'm scared too. But don't pretend this is about logic when it's about fear. Maybe fear is logical when the alternative is hurting my daughter. Or maybe you're using Emma as an excuse because admitting you want this is harder than hiding behind being a responsible parent. The words hit like a slap. Daniel sat back, anger and hurt mixing into something he couldn't name. That's not fair, isn't it? Evelyn's voice was quiet now, almost sad. You just told me we fit last night, that it felt right. But instead of talking about what that means or how we might make it work, you're already listing all the reasons why it's impossible. Because it is impossible. Daniel's voice rose slightly, and he forced himself to lower it. Long distance doesn't work. Not with a kid involved. Not when you'll be in Boston building a company and I'm here managing projects and raising Emma. What are we supposed to do? Video calls and twice-a-year visits? That's not a relationship. That's torture. What if we made it work anyway? How? Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she didn't have an answer, and they both knew it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they wanted and couldn't have. I need to get back, Daniel said finally, standing. Riverside presentation is at 2. Daniel, I'm not giving up. I need time to think, to figure out what I can actually offer you versus what I want to offer you. Evelyn stood too, and for a second Daniel thought she might reach for him. Instead, she just nodded. 2 more days, she said. 2 more days. Daniel walked back to the office through the rain, letting it soak through his jacket because external discomfort was easier to process than the knot in his chest. The Riverside presentation went fine, which meant Daniel functioned on autopilot while his brain replayed the lunch conversation on an endless loop. When it ended, he had 17 emails waiting and a voicemail from Emma's school about early pickup tomorrow for parent-teacher conferences. Normal life, continuing like nothing had changed. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Drinks after work? You look like you need one." Daniel almost said no, then realized sitting alone with his thoughts sounded worse. "Yeah. Usual place? See you at 6. The Usual Place was a dive bar 3 blocks from the office that served cheap beer and didn't ask questions. Marcus was already there, 2 bottles waiting. "Rough day?" Marcus asked, sliding one across. "Something like that. You've been weird since the Boston announcement. Everything okay?" Daniel took a long drink instead of answering. Marcus studied him. "This about Evelyn? What makes you say that?" "Because you've been in love with her for at least a year, and now she's leaving, and you look like someone kicked your dog." Daniel choked on his beer. "I'm not... What? Come on, man. You think nobody notices?" Marcus grinned, but it was kind. "The way you watch her in meetings? How you always volunteer for projects she's leading? Jennifer from accounting has a betting pool on when you'll finally ask her out." "That's... We work together. She's my boss. That would be completely inappropriate." "Yeah, because workplace romance never happens." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Look, I'm not judging. Evelyn's brilliant and intimidating and apparently also human enough to notice when people skip lunch, which she only does for you, by the way. She does it for everyone. She really doesn't. Last month I worked through lunch 3 days straight, and she didn't say a word. You do it once, and she's leaving protein bars on your desk with passive-aggressive sticky notes about low blood sugar affecting productivity." Daniel stared at his beer, processing. "The point is," Marcus continued, "whatever's happening between you two isn't as secret as you think, and if you have feelings for her, you should probably do something about it before she's 1,200 miles away. It's not that simple. It never is. But regret is worse than complicated." Marcus finished his beer. "My ex-wife and I split because we let logistics and fear make our decisions instead of actually trying. Now I see my kids every other weekend and wonder what would have happened if we'd fought harder. I have Emma to think about." "Emma who asked if Evelyn was your girlfriend, according to the office gossip mill." Daniel's head snapped up. "How do you know about that?" "Dude, you told Jennifer when she asked how dinner went. She told everyone." Marcus signaled for another round. "Kids are more adaptable than we give them credit for. Emma's already attached to Evelyn based on how much you talk about her. The question isn't whether your daughter can handle you dating someone. It's whether you're brave enough to try." Daniel sat with that while their second beers arrived. "She's leaving Friday," he said finally. "So you have 2 days to figure out if you're going to let her go or fight for something real. Long distance with a 6-year-old sucks, yeah. But you know what sucks more? Spending the next 2 years wondering what if." Marcus stood, dropping cash on the bar. "Think about it, and maybe talk to Evelyn instead of assuming it's impossible. She didn't build a successful company by accepting impossible as an answer." After Marcus left, Daniel sat alone nursing his beer and thinking about what-ifs and possibilities and all the logical reasons why this couldn't work that suddenly felt less solid than they had an hour ago. His phone buzzed. "How was your day?" Evelyn's text was casual, normal, like they hadn't spent lunch arguing about fear and logistics. "Complicated. You?" "Same. I keep drafting emails to the Boston team and deleting them because I can't focus." "Why not?" "Because I keep thinking about what you said. About us fitting." Daniel's chest tightened. "I keep thinking about it too. And I don't know what to do with it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Can I come over tonight after Emma's asleep?" "I know it's late notice, but I don't want to waste the time we have left having this conversation over text." Daniel should say no. Should maintain boundaries, keep things professional, protect Emma from the complexity of whatever this was becoming. "What time?" 9? "Okay." Daniel finished his beer and headed home, stopping to pick up Thai food because cooking felt impossible and Emma would eat pad Thai if he asked nicely. Dinner was normal. Emma chattering about her friend Sophie's drama with another girl in their class, showing him her latest piano homework, asking if they could get a dog for the 50th time. "Not yet, baby. Dogs are a lot of work. You always say that. Because it's always true. Emma studied him seriously. Are you sad, Daddy? Why would I be sad? You have your sad face, the one you try to hide but don't. Daniel pulled her into a hug because 6-year-olds shouldn't be this observant. I'm not sad, just thinking about work stuff. Is Miss Carter leaving making you sad? Everything in Daniel stilled. A little, he admitted, because lying to Emma had never worked. You should tell her you don't want her to go. It's not that simple, Em. She has to go for her job. But you're sad, so she should know. If only adult relationships were that straightforward. Daniel got Emma through bath time and into bed, reading 3 chapters of the book they were working through before she finally fell asleep. Then he paced his apartment for 20 minutes, alternating between cleaning things that didn't need cleaning and checking his phone. At 9:03, someone knocked softly. Evelyn stood in his doorway wearing jeans and an old sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms, and everything like someone who was just as terrified as he was. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there for an awkward beat before Daniel stepped aside to let her in. His apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, furnished with a mix of secondhand furniture and things he and Sarah had bought when they thought they'd have forever. Emma's drawings covered the fridge. School papers littered the coffee table. It was lived in and messy, and nothing like the sleek spaces Daniel knew Evelyn was used to. Sorry about the mess, he said, grabbing Emma's scattered toys. Don't. Evelyn's voice was soft. This is real. I like real. She sat on the couch, and Daniel joined her, leaving careful distance between them. I'm sorry about lunch, Evelyn said. I pushed too hard, made assumptions about what you were feeling instead of listening. You weren't wrong, though. Daniel stared at his hands. I am scared. And maybe I am using Emma as an excuse because admitting I want this feels like betraying Sarah's memory or setting myself up to get hurt or a dozen other things I can't articulate properly. Can I tell you something? Evelyn turned to face him. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. I spent the first 6 months after you came back from bereavement leave telling myself it was just sympathy, that I felt protective because you were grieving and struggling, and it would pass once you were stable again. What changed? You did. You stopped being the broken widower and started being Daniel again. You laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes in meetings. You defended your team when clients were unreasonable. You brought Emma to the office, and she drew pictures of buildings, and you looked at her like she'd created fine art. Evelyn's smile was sad. And I realized I wasn't in love with the tragedy of you. I was in love with who you actually are. Daniel's throat was tight. I don't know when it happened for me. It wasn't some big moment. It was just accumulation. Coffee and late nights and the way you remember things about Emma I mentioned once in passing, the way you make me feel like I'm not just surviving anymore. But I'm terrified of what happens when you leave, of missing you, of Emma getting attached and then having to explain why someone else disappeared from her life, of trying long distance and failing and losing whatever this could be because we forced it into an impossible situation. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. What if we didn't think of it as impossible? What if we just took it one step at a time and saw what happened? You're talking about long distance, with a kid, and you building a company in another city. That's not one step at a time, Evelyn. That's jumping off a cliff and hoping we figure out how to fly on the way down. Maybe. Or maybe it's trusting that what we feel is strong enough to handle the distance. She moved closer, close enough that Daniel could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. I know it won't be easy. I know there'll be missed calls and lonely nights and moments where it feels impossible, but I also know that walking away without trying feels worse than any of that. What if we try and it doesn't work? What if the distance kills it and we both end up hurt and Emma gets caught in the middle? What if we try and it does work? Evelyn countered. What if we're stronger than we think? What if 2 years of building whatever this is means we have a foundation that can handle 1,200 miles? Daniel wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that love was enough to bridge distance and time zones and all the practical complications that made this feel impossible. I need you to understand something, he said slowly. If we do this, Emma comes first. Always. Which means if she's struggling or it's affecting her negatively, I have to choose her, even if it means ending things with you. I wouldn't expect anything less. Evelyn's voice was steady. She's your daughter. Of course she comes first. And you have to promise me you won't sacrifice your career for this. That Boston stays non-negotiable, and if we can't make long-distance work, you don't come back early or turn down opportunities because of me. Daniel, promise me, Evelyn, because I can't be the reason you give up everything you've worked for. I won't be that person. She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel could see her fighting with herself. Okay, she finally said, I promise. Boston stays the plan. My career doesn't get sacrificed. We figure this out within those boundaries, or we don't figure it out at all. Okay. They sat there in the dim light of Daniel's living room, surrounded by the evidence of his life with Emma, and Daniel felt the last of his resistance crumbling. I want to try, he said quietly. I'm terrified, and I don't know how we make this work. But I want to try. Evelyn's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah. Daniel finally closed the distance between them, taking her hand. I've spent 3 years in survival mode, and you make me feel like there's more than just getting through each day. I don't want to lose that. You won't. Her fingers tightened around his. We'll figure it out. Video calls and visits and whatever it takes to make this work. It's going to be hard. Most good things are. Daniel looked at their joined hands, thinking about coffee with 1 sugar and Thai food ordered for safety, and 2 years of someone noticing him when he thought he was invisible. When do you leave? Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock flight. 2 days. They had 2 days to build a foundation for something that would be tested immediately by distance and circumstance, and every logical reason why this shouldn't work. Tomorrow night, Daniel said, after Emma's asleep. Just us. A real date. No kid interruptions, no work talk, just us. Figuring out what this actually is before you go. Where? I don't know yet. Somewhere we can talk without an audience, somewhere that feels like a beginning instead of an ending. Evelyn smiled, and it was the first genuine, unguarded smile Daniel had seen since this whole thing started. Okay, she said, tomorrow night, a real date. Our first actual first date. Technically third if you count the other 2 dinners. Those were reconnaissance. This is official. Daniel laughed, and it felt good, felt right. They sat there for another hour talking about logistics and fears and what long distance might actually look like. Evelyn promised to fly back once a month at minimum. Daniel promised to be honest if Emma struggled. They made plans without guarantees, building something fragile and hopeful in the space between Thursday night and Friday afternoon. When Evelyn finally left, standing in his doorway at midnight, looking beautiful and terrified and determined, she kissed his cheek and whispered, "Thank you for being brave enough to try." Daniel watched her drive away, then went to check on Emma. His daughter was sprawled across her bed, clutching her stuffed elephant, and Daniel sat on the floor beside her. I hope I'm doing the right thing, he whispered to the sleeping 6-year-old who'd given him permission to move forward. I hope you understand someday why this was worth the risk. Emma didn't answer, just kept sleeping peacefully, and Daniel took that as whatever kind of sign he needed. The next morning was chaos. Emma couldn't find her homework, Daniel burned the toast, and they were late leaving for school. But underneath the normal routine, Daniel felt something different, something like hope. At work, Evelyn caught his eye during the morning meeting and smiled, and Daniel smiled back, and Marcus gave him a knowing look that Daniel ignored. His phone buzzed at lunch. Still on for tonight? Absolutely. Where are we going? It's a surprise. Pick you up at 8? I'll be ready. Daniel spent the afternoon distracted, barely focusing on the CAD drawings that needed his attention. At 4:30, he left to get Emma, and she bounced into the car full of news about her day. Sophie's having a sleepover this weekend and she invited me. That sounds fun, baby. Can I go, please? Daniel's brain stuttered. A sleepover this weekend meant Saturday night, meant Emma wouldn't be home, meant he and Evelyn could have more than just one evening before she left. Let me talk to Sophie's mom and make sure it's okay. Emma squealed, already planning what stuffed animals she'd bring. That night, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Chen had agreed to stay late, Daniel changed clothes 3 times before settling on something that felt like himself. Jeans, a button-down, nothing too formal or trying too hard. At 8 exactly, Evelyn knocked. She wore a dress Daniel had never seen before, something simple and dark that made her look less like his CEO and more like someone he might have met anywhere else and fallen for just as hard. Hi, she said. Hi. Daniel grabbed his jacket. Where are we going? You'll see. They drove through Chicago in Evelyn's car, and Daniel tried not to think about how this time tomorrow they'd be saying goodbye at an airport instead of hello at his door. Evelyn pulled up to Navy Pier, now quiet in the off-season, and Daniel raised an eyebrow. Tourist trap? Trust me. She led him past the closed attractions to a small restaurant Daniel had never noticed, tucked away with windows overlooking the lake. It was almost empty, just a few other couples scattered throughout. How did you find this place? Daniel asked as they sat. I've lived in Chicago my whole life. You learned the good hiding spots. Evelyn's smile was nervous. Is this okay? I wanted somewhere we could actually talk without running into anyone from work. It's perfect. And somehow, it was. They ordered food neither of them ate much of, too focused on the conversation that mattered more than dinner. Tell me something I don't know about you, Evelyn said. Something you've never told anyone at work. Daniel thought about it. I wanted to be a teacher, before architecture. I loved the idea of helping kids understand how things fit together, but my dad said teaching didn't pay enough to support a family, so I switched majors sophomore year. Do you regret it? Sometimes. I like architecture. I'm good at it. But I wonder what would have happened if I'd stuck with what I actually wanted instead of what was practical. You're a good teacher anyway, Evelyn said. You've mentored half the junior designers. Marcus told me his first year would have been hell if you hadn't taken time to explain things when he was overwhelmed. Marcus talks too much. Marcus sees what I see, that you're good at this job not because of the technical skills, but because you care about people. She paused. My turn? Tell me something. I'm terrified of Boston. The admission came out quiet. Everyone thinks I'm so confident, so ready to do this expansion, but I wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if I'm making a huge mistake. If I'm going to fail and prove right everyone who thought a 30-year-old woman couldn't run this company. Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand. You're not going to fail? You don't know that? Yes, I do. Because I've watched you turn impossible situations into successful projects for 2 years. Because you don't give up when things get hard. Because you're the most determined person I've ever met. Evelyn's eyes were bright. What if I'm not as strong as everyone thinks? Then you're still stronger than you give yourself credit for. Daniel squeezed her hand. And you don't have to do it alone. I might be 1,200 miles away, but I'm still here. Whatever you need. What I need is for this to work. Her voice cracked slightly. I need to know that when I'm in Boston building this company, you're in Chicago being patient with my missed calls and understanding when I'm too exhausted to talk. I need to know Emma won't forget me between visits. I need... Hey. Daniel moved his chair closer. We're going to make this work. It's not going to be perfect. We're going to have hard days and miscommunications and moments where the distance feels unbearable. But we're also going to figure it out because giving up isn't an option. You sound sure. I'm faking it, but I'm faking it convincingly, right? Evelyn laughed through tears, and Daniel realized this was what love looked like. Messy and scared and trying anyway. They stayed at the restaurant until closing, talking about everything and nothing. Evelyn told him about her father's death, about inheriting a company at 25 and being terrified she'd destroy his legacy. Daniel told her about Sarah, about the accident, about the guilt he still carried for being at work when it happened instead of being there. By the time they left, it was past midnight, and the city was quiet around them. Evelyn drove him home, and at his door Daniel didn't want to let her go. Tomorrow's your last day, he said. I know. I don't know how to say goodbye to you. Then don't. Evelyn moved closer. Say see you later. Say this isn't ending, just changing. Say anything except goodbye. Daniel kissed her then, soft and careful, and it felt like a promise and a question at the same time. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was smiling through tears. See you at work tomorrow, she whispered. See you tomorrow. Daniel watched her drive away, then went inside where Emma was still asleep and his life was still waiting, and let himself believe that maybe impossible wasn't the final answer after all. Friday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made Chicago feel like the center of the universe. And Daniel woke up with his chest already tight, knowing that by tonight, Evelyn would be gone. Emma was unusually quiet during breakfast, pushing her cereal around the bowl without eating much. You okay, baby? Is Miss Carter leaving today? Daniel's coffee suddenly tasted like regret. Yeah, her flight's this afternoon. Are you sad? A little. Emma looked at him with those two observant eyes. A lot, I think. Maybe a lot, Daniel admitted, because lying to his daughter had never worked and wasn't going to start now. Can we say goodbye to her? Daniel's throat closed up. I don't know if that's a good idea, Em. She's probably really busy getting ready. Please, Daddy, I want to give her something. What do you want to give her? Emma disappeared into her room and came back holding a drawing she must have made yesterday, a building with windows and people inside, and 3 stick figures standing in front labeled Daddy, Me, and Miss Carter in her careful first-grade handwriting. Daniel's vision blurred. That's beautiful, baby. I want her to remember us when she's in Boston, so she knows we miss her. How did he end up with a 6-year-old who understood feelings better than most adults? Daniel pulled Emma into a hug and texted Evelyn before he could overthink it. Emma made you something. Can we stop by before you leave for the airport? The response came fast. Please, I was hoping I'd see her one more time. Daniel got Emma to school, sat through 3 meetings he barely remembered, and somehow made it to 4 o'clock when his phone buzzed with Evelyn's location. She wasn't at the office. She was at her apartment, a place Daniel had never been. He picked up Emma and drove to an address in Gold Coast, a building so expensive Daniel felt underdressed just parking in front of it. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor, and Emma clutched her drawing the whole way. Evelyn answered the door in jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and the organized chaos of someone trying to condense their life into luggage. Hi, she said, and her voice was already unsteady. Hi. Daniel stepped inside with Emma, taking in the apartment that was so completely Evelyn it hurt. Minimalist and elegant with unexpected touches of warmth, books everywhere, plants by the windows, a photo of her father on the mantel. Emma walked straight up to Evelyn and held out the drawing. I made this for you, so you remember us. Evelyn took the drawing with shaking hands, and Daniel watched her face crumble as she looked at the 3 stick figures standing together. Emma, this is... Her voice broke. This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. Really? Really? Evelyn crouched down to Emma's level. Can I hang it in my new office in Boston? Emma nodded seriously. So you don't forget about us when you're working. I could never forget about you, or your dad. Evelyn glanced up at Daniel, and the look in her eyes said everything words couldn't. Emma surprised them both by throwing her arms around Evelyn's neck. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you too, sweetheart. Evelyn hugged her back, and Daniel had to look away because watching them say goodbye was destroying him. When Emma finally let go, she looked between Daniel and Evelyn with that knowing expression that made her seem far older than 6. You should hug Daddy too. He's sadder than me. Emma, Daniel started, but Evelyn was already moving toward him. She wrapped her arms around him, and Daniel held her like he could somehow make the next few hours not happen through sheer force of will. I don't know how to do this, he whispered against her hair. Me either. They stood there in her half-packed apartment while Emma wandered over to look at the books on the shelf, and Daniel tried to memorize everything, the way Evelyn fit against him, the smell of her perfume, the sound of her breathing. What time's your flight? He asked, even though he already knew. 7:30. I need to leave for O'Hare in an hour. An hour. They had 1 hour left, and Emma was here, and there was so much Daniel wanted to say that he couldn't find words for. Can Emma and I drive you to the airport? Evelyn pulled back to look at him. You don't have to. I want to, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. They helped Evelyn finish packing, which mostly meant Emma asking questions about Boston, while Daniel moved suitcases to the door and tried not to think about coming back to Chicago without her. The apartment would be sublet while she was gone. Temporary tenants living in the space where Evelyn had built her life before everything changed. The drive to O'Hare was quiet. Emma fell asleep in the back seat 10 minutes in, exhausted from the emotional weight of goodbye, and Daniel reached across the console to take Evelyn's hand. I'm terrified, she said quietly. Of Boston? Of everything, the expansion, long distance, losing you before we've even really started. Her fingers tightened around his. What if we can't make this work? Then we'll have tried. That has to count for something. Does it? Or does it just make it hurt worse when it falls apart? Daniel didn't have a good answer for that. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to suburbs, giving way to the airport sprawl. I got you something, Evelyn said as Daniel navigated toward departures. It's in my bag, the small one. You didn't have to get me anything. I wanted to. At the terminal, Daniel parked in short term and carefully transferred Emma to his shoulder without waking her. Inside, Evelyn grabbed her bags and then handed Daniel a small wrapped box. Open it later, after I'm gone. Evelyn, please, I can't watch you open it or I'll fall apart right here in the middle of the airport. Daniel pocketed the box and helped her check her bags, the process mechanical and surreal. This was happening. She was actually leaving. At security, they stood in that awkward space where people say goodbye, and Daniel realized he had no idea how to let her go. You'll text me when you land? The second I'm off the plane. Evelyn looked at Emma sleeping on Daniel's shoulder, then back at him. Take care of her. Always. And take care of yourself. Don't work through lunch. Don't skip sleep when projects get stressful. Don't forget that you matter. I'll try. Daniel, Evelyn's voice cracked. I love you. I know we haven't said it officially, and maybe it's too soon, but I'm getting on a plane in 5 minutes, and I need you to know I love you. I've loved you for 2 years, and I'm going to keep loving you from Boston. The words hit Daniel square in the chest. He shifted Emma carefully and cupped Evelyn's face with his free hand. I love you too. I don't know when it happened or how to make this work, but I love you. They kissed there in the airport, gentle and desperate at the same time, while travelers rushed past and Emma slept through the moment her father's life split into before and after. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was crying. I have to go. I know. This isn't goodbye. It's not, Daniel agreed, even though it felt exactly like goodbye. Evelyn kissed Emma's forehead, careful not to wake her, then grabbed her carry-on and walked toward security. She looked back once, and Daniel raised his hand in a wave that felt completely inadequate. Then she was through security and gone, and Daniel stood there holding his sleeping daughter in the middle of O'Hare International Airport, feeling like someone had hollowed him out. The drive home was worse than the drive there. Emma woke up halfway back and asked where Miss Carter was, and Daniel had to explain that she was on the plane now, flying to Boston, starting her new adventure. When will we see her again? I don't know, baby. Soon, hopefully. I miss her already. Me too. At home, Daniel got Emma through dinner and bath time on autopilot, his mind stuck somewhere between Chicago and 30,000 feet in the air. After Emma was asleep, he sat on the couch and pulled out the box Evelyn had given him. Inside was a key, silver and simple, with a tag that read, Boston Apartment, for whenever you're ready. And underneath, a note in Evelyn's precise handwriting. Daniel, this is me being brave. This is me saying I believe we can make this work, even when it's hard. Even when the distance feels impossible and we're both exhausted and the logistics don't make sense. Come visit when you can. Bring Emma. Make the guest room yours. Let this feel like a place you belong, not just somewhere you visit. I meant what I said at the airport. I love you. I've loved you through coffee orders and late nights and watching you be the best father I've ever seen. I love you through the distance and the fear and the complete impracticality of what we're trying to do. So here's a key. Use it whenever you want. Mi casa es su casa, or however that works when the casa is 1,200 miles away. Call me when you're ready. Or don't call, just show up. Either way, I'll be waiting. Love, E. Daniel read the note 3 times, then sat there holding the key like it was something precious and fragile. His phone buzzed, landed safely. Boston is cold and I already hate my temporary apartment. How's Emma? Asleep, missing you? We both are. I miss you too. So much it's physically painful. When can I call? Now? I'm in a cab to my place, but I can talk. Daniel called before he could overthink it, and Evelyn answered on the first ring. Hi. Hi. Her voice sounded tired and small. I made it. How was the flight? Long. I kept thinking about you standing there in the airport with Emma asleep on your shoulder, and I almost turned around 3 times before the plane even took off. You can't turn around on a plane. I would have found a way. A pause. I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable and needing someone. I'm supposed to be the one who has everything together. You don't have to have everything together with me. That's terrifying. I know. Daniel leaned back on the couch. I opened your present. And? And that was incredibly presumptuous of you, giving me a key after one official date. Too much? No. It was perfect. Daniel smiled even though she couldn't see it. Thank you for believing this can work when I'm still figuring out how to believe it. We'll figure it out together. That's the whole point. They talked for 2 hours, Evelyn describing her temporary apartment while Daniel told her about Emma's reaction to her being gone. It was normal and surreal at the same time. Talking to her on the phone instead of across a conference table, hearing traffic sounds from a different city, knowing she was building a life he wasn't part of yet. When they finally hung up, it was past midnight and Daniel felt the weight of her absence settle into his bones. The first week was brutal. Daniel threw himself into work, taking on extra projects to avoid the empty spaces where Evelyn used to be. Emma asked about her every day, and Daniel showed her how to video call on his phone so she could tell Evelyn about school. Watching them talk, seeing Emma's face light up when Evelyn answered, made something in Daniel's chest ache and heal at the same time. Miss Carter says Boston has good pizza, but not as good as Chicago, Emma reported after one call. Miss Carter is right about that. When can we visit? Soon, baby. She's still getting settled. But soon felt impossibly far away when Daniel was buried in deadlines and Emma's schedule and the daily grind of single parenthood without the one person who'd made it feel less lonely. 3 weeks in, Daniel broke down and called Marcus. I don't know if I can do this. Long distance? Any of it. She's building a company in Boston, and I'm here managing projects and raising Emma, and we talk every day, but it's not enough. I miss her so much it's affecting my work. So go visit. I can't just leave. Emma has school. I have deadlines. Daniel. Marcus's voice was firm. You're making excuses. Emma's in first grade. She can miss a Friday. Your deadlines can wait. What you can't do is keep torturing yourself by staying away when Evelyn gave you a literal key to her apartment. What if I go and it's weird? What if seeing each other in person after 3 weeks of distance makes us realize this isn't working? What if it doesn't? Marcus countered. What if you go and remember why you're doing this in the first place? That night, Daniel texted Evelyn. What are you doing next weekend? Working, probably. Why? How do you feel about visitors? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Are you serious? Emma has that sleepover Saturday night. I could fly out Friday after work, stay until Sunday. Daniel? Yes. Obviously, yes. I've been waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready. Probably. Ask me again when I'm not terrified. You're always terrified. That's part of your charm. I don't think terror is charming. It is when you do brave things anyway. Daniel booked the flights before he could change his mind, arranged coverage for his projects, and told Emma they were going to visit Miss Carter in Boston. Really? Can I come? Not this time, baby. You have Sophie's sleepover, remember? But we'll visit together soon. Emma accepted this with the easy flexibility of childhood, already excited about her sleepover. And Daniel tried not to think about the fact that he was flying to Boston in a week to see the woman he'd fallen in love with in the space between coffee orders and impossible confessions. The week crawled by in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. Daniel packed and repacked his bag 3 times, changed his shirt 4 times Friday morning, and arrived at O'Hare 2 hours early because sitting at home was impossible. The flight to Boston took 2 hours but felt like 6. Daniel spent the whole time alternating between excitement and terror, wondering what he was doing, whether this was a mistake, if seeing Evelyn again would make the distance easier or harder. She was waiting at baggage claim when he landed, and the sight of her, real and solid in here, made everything else disappear. Hi, she said, and her smile was worth every mile between Chicago and Boston. Hi. Daniel dropped his bag and pulled her into his arms, and it was like breathing properly for the first time in 3 weeks. You're really here. I'm really here. They stood there in the middle of the airport holding each other while travelers navigated around them, and Daniel felt something settle that had been restless since she left. Evelyn's apartment was in Back Bay, a corner unit with exposed brick and windows overlooking the city. It was smaller than her Chicago place, furnished with temporary rental furniture, but she'd already made it hers. Books on the shelves, plants by the windows, Emma's drawing framed on the wall by her desk. You framed it, Daniel said, touching the edge of the frame. Of course I did. It's the best thing in this apartment. They ordered takeout because neither of them could focus on cooking, and Daniel told her about work and Emma and the 3 weeks that had felt like 3 months. Evelyn told him about the Boston office, about the team she was building, about the challenges of starting from scratch in a new city. It's lonely, she admitted. I knew it would be, but knowing and experiencing are different things. I come home to this empty apartment every night and wish you were here. I'm here now. For 2 days. It's better than nothing. They stayed up until 2 a.m. talking, making up for 3 weeks of phone calls that weren't enough. And when Daniel finally fell asleep on her couch, Evelyn covered him with a blanket and kissed his forehead. Saturday morning, they woke up tangled together, and Evelyn made coffee, black with 1 sugar for both of them, while Daniel called to check on Emma. She's fine, Sophie's mom reported. They've been playing dolls all morning, don't worry. But Daniel always worried. It was part of the job description. They spent the day exploring Boston, Evelyn showing him the office space, introducing him to her small team, walking through neighborhoods she was learning to navigate. It felt normal and strange at the same time, seeing her life without him in it, understanding all the pieces he only heard about on phone calls. That night, they cooked dinner together in her small kitchen, and Daniel realized this was what he'd been missing. Not just Evelyn, but the easy intimacy of shared space and comfortable silence. I've been thinking, Evelyn said as they cleaned up, about us, about how to make this actually work instead of just surviving the distance. Okay. What if you moved here? Daniel's hand stilled on the dish he was drying. What? Not now. Not immediately. But eventually. Evelyn turned to face him. Your work is mostly remote anyway since COVID. Emma could transfer schools, you could both move to Boston, and we could actually build a life together instead of stealing weekends when we can. Evelyn, yeah, I know it's a huge ask. I know Emma's settled in Chicago and you have a life there, and asking you to uproot everything is insane. But I'm standing here in this apartment wishing you didn't have to leave tomorrow, and I'm trying to figure out how to make that not just a wish. Daniel set down the dish, his mind racing. Move to Boston, leave Chicago, take Emma away from her school, her friends, the city where her mother was buried. I can't, he said quietly. I'm sorry, but I can't. Evelyn's face fell. Why not? Because Emma's whole life is in Chicago. Her school, her friends, Sarah's family. I can't take her away from all of that because I fell in love with someone who lives somewhere else. So what, we just keep doing this? Weekend visits and phone calls and missing each other? I don't know. Daniel's frustration boiled over. I don't have all the answers, Evelyn. I'm doing the best I can with an impossible situation. Impossible because you won't even consider alternatives. Alternatives that involve uprooting my daughter's entire life. They stood there in her kitchen, the evening ruined by reality crashing into hope, and Daniel felt everything they'd been building start to crack. I should go, he said finally. Daniel, don't. I need air, I need to think. He grabbed his jacket and left before Evelyn could stop him, walking through unfamiliar Boston streets trying to process what she'd asked, and why it felt both impossible and like the only solution. His phone buzzed with texts from Evelyn. Apologies, explanations, please to come back so they could talk. Daniel ignored them all, walking until he found himself at the harbor, staring at water and city lights, and wondering how loving someone could feel so complicated. An hour later, his phone rang. Not Evelyn. Emma. Daddy, are you okay? I'm fine, baby. Just taking a walk. How's the sleepover? Good. But Sophie's mom said you sounded sad when you called earlier. Are you sad? Daniel's chest tightened. A little. Is it because of Miss Carter? Sort of. Do you love her? The question was so direct, so Emma, that Daniel had to smile despite everything. Yeah, baby, I do. Then why are you sad? Love is supposed to make you happy. It's complicated. You always say that. Emma's voice was matter of fact. But I think you just make it complicated. Miss Carter is nice, and she makes you smile, and she remembers things about me. That seems simple. Out of the mouths of 6-year-olds came wisdom that made Daniel's complications feel ridiculous. You're pretty smart, you know that? Sophie says I'm bossy, but I think that's the same thing. Daniel laughed, real and surprised. Go back to your sleepover, Em. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay. But Daddy, stop being sad. Miss Carter probably misses you too. She hung up before Daniel could respond, and he stood there by the harbor thinking about how his 6-year-old daughter had just solved the problem he'd been agonizing over. It was simple. He loved Evelyn. She loved him. Everything else was just logistics and fear dressed up as impossible. Daniel walked back to Evelyn's apartment, using the key she'd given him to let himself in. She was curled up on the couch looking miserable, and she jumped when she saw him. "I'm sorry," they said at the same time. Daniel crossed the room and sat beside her. "You first." "I shouldn't have pushed. Asking you to move here was unfair when you've been doing this for 3 weeks, and I've been planning it for months in my head." Evelyn's voice was thick with tears. "I just miss you so much, and seeing you here made me realize how much I want this to be our normal instead of a special occasion." "I want that too," Daniel said quietly. "And maybe you're right. Maybe eventually moving here makes sense, but I need time to figure out how to do that without hurting Emma." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry for wanting a future with me. Daniel's throat was tight. "That's the best thing anyone's wanted in a long time." Evelyn leaned against him, and they sat there in her temporary apartment building something fragile and real. "Emma called me while I was walking," Daniel said. "Told me I was making this too complicated, that you're nice and you make me smile and that should be simple." "She's not wrong." "She rarely is. It's annoying." Evelyn laughed, wet and unsteady. "So what do? We take it one step at a time. We keep doing the phone calls and visits and missing each other. We let Emma get used to the idea of you being a real part of our lives. And when the timing's right, we figure out what comes next." "That's not a plan." "No, but it's honest." Daniel kissed her forehead. "I love you. That's the simple part. Everything else we'll figure out together." "Together," Evelyn agreed. They spent the rest of Saturday night talking through logistics, how often Daniel could visit when Evelyn could fly to Chicago, how to make Emma feel included in a relationship that was mostly happening 1,200 miles away. It wasn't perfect, but it felt possible. Sunday morning came too fast, and Daniel packed his bag while Evelyn made breakfast neither of them ate. At the airport, their goodbye was easier than the first time, but still hurt. "I'll call you tonight," Daniel promised. "I'll be waiting." Evelyn kissed him, soft and lingering. "Thank you for coming, for trying. Thank you for making it worth trying." The flight home gave Daniel too much time to think about Boston and Chicago and the impossible logistics of loving someone who lives somewhere else, about Emma and what was best for her versus what Daniel wanted, about Evelyn building a life he wasn't part of and whether that would always be true. Emma was waiting when he got home, full of stories about her sleepover and questions about his trip. "Did you have fun with Miss Carter?" "I did." "Good. You look less sad." Daniel pulled her into a hug. "You know I love you, right? More than anything." "I know, Daddy." Emma hugged him back. "I love you too, and I love Miss Carter. Is that okay?" Daniel's heart cracked open. "Yeah, baby, that's more than okay." That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel video called Evelyn, and they talked until they both fell asleep with their phones still connected. And it wasn't the same as being together, but it was something. 3 months turned into 6. Daniel visited Boston twice more, and Evelyn came to Chicago for Thanksgiving and Emma's 7th birthday. They built a routine: video calls every night, weekend visits when possible, constant texts throughout the day. It wasn't perfect. There were missed calls and miscommunications, and nights when the distance felt unbearable. There were moments when Daniel wondered if they were torturing themselves for something that couldn't work. But there were also mornings when Emma asked when Miss Carter was visiting next, and video calls where Evelyn helped with homework from 1,200 miles away, and the slow, steady building of something real. Daniel started researching schools in Boston. Not seriously, just looking, just seeing what was out there, just imagining what it might look like to actually build a life with Evelyn instead of just visiting one. He didn't tell her about the research, not yet, but he kept the keys she'd given him on his keychain, a reminder that someday soon might not be an impossible timeline after all. The call came on a Tuesday night in March, 18 months after Evelyn had left for Boston. Daniel was helping Emma with her math homework, fractions that somehow made less sense in 2nd grade than they had when he learned them, when his phone lit up with Evelyn's face. "I need to tell you something," she said without preamble, her voice tight in a way that made Daniel's stomach drop. "Keep working on number 7. I'll be right back." He stepped into the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The opposite, actually. Evelyn took a breath. The Boston office is profitable, like significantly profitable, 6 months ahead of projections. That's amazing. Why do you sound terrified? Because the board wants me back in Chicago. They want to promote someone local to run Boston and have me take over both offices as chief operating officer. It's basically my dad's old role before he moved to CEO. Daniel's brain stuttered. You'd move back? If I accept, which I haven't yet because I needed to talk to you first. Why? Why do I need to talk to you, Daniel? We've been doing long distance for 18 months. You've been researching Boston schools. Don't think I haven't noticed you asking suspiciously specific questions about neighborhoods. And now I'm being offered a chance to come back to Chicago, and I need to know if that's what you want or if I'd be making a huge decision based on assumptions. Daniel leaned against the counter, his mind racing. Evelyn back in Chicago. No more distance. No more weekend visits and missed calls and falling asleep on video chat. Just her, here, every day. When do they need an answer? 2 weeks. Come visit this weekend. We'll talk about it properly. Daniel, I'm not having this conversation over the phone. It's too important. He glanced back at Emma, who was very obviously not doing her homework and definitely trying to eavesdrop. Come Friday. Stay through Sunday. We'll figure it out together. There was a pause. Then Evelyn's voice came back softer. Okay, Friday. After they hung up, Daniel stood in his kitchen trying to process what had just happened. Emma appeared in the doorway, abandoning all pretense of math. Is Miss Carter coming to visit? Friday. How much of that did you hear? All of it. You weren't being very quiet. Emma climbed onto a kitchen chair. Is she moving back to Chicago? Maybe. It's complicated. You always say that when you mean yes, but you're scared. Daniel had to laugh because his 7-year-old daughter was absolutely right. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more when I say things you don't want to hear. Fair enough. Daniel sat across from her. How would you feel if Miss Carter moved back? If she was around more? Emma considered this seriously. Would she be your girlfriend? Like, official? Probably. Is that okay with you? Does she make you happy? Very. Then it's okay with me. Emma swung her legs under the chair. I miss her. Video calls are good, but they're not the same as real visits. And I want to show her my piano recital in May, not just tell her about it. You really like her, huh? Daddy. Emma gave him a look that said he was being deliberately obtuse. I've liked her since that first dinner when she asked about my multiplication homework and actually listened to my answer. Most grown-ups just pretend to care about kid stuff. Daniel's throat tightened. Yeah, she's pretty special. So don't mess it up by being scared. I'll try. But when Friday arrived and Daniel picked Evelyn up from O'Hare, the fear was still there underneath the joy of seeing her. They'd gotten good at long distance. Too good, maybe. It had become their normal. And now they were talking about changing everything again. Emma monopolized Evelyn for the first hour, showing her every drawing and school paper from the past month, demonstrating her improved piano skills, talking nonstop about her upcoming recital. Evelyn listened to all of it like Emma was presenting the most important information in the world, and Daniel watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. This was what he wanted. Not someday. Now. After Emma went to bed, Daniel and Evelyn sat on the couch with the careful distance of people who needed to talk before they could touch. So, Evelyn said, Chicago. Boston was your dream, the expansion, proving you could build something from nothing. Are you sure you want to give that up? I'm not giving it up. I built it. It's successful. And now I'm being offered a chance to come home and take on an even bigger role. She turned to face him. But I need to know if Chicago still feels like home, or if I've been romanticizing what I left behind. What does that mean? It means we've been doing long distance for 18 months, Daniel. We've gotten good at phone calls and airport goodbyes and making the most of stolen weekends. But we've never actually tried being together in the same city as a real couple. What if we do that and realize the distance was easier than the reality? Daniel understood the fear. They'd built something in the spaces between visits, in late-night calls and carefully planned trips. Adding daily life, with all its mundane annoyances and regular disappointments, could either strengthen what they had or prove it was only sustainable at a distance. I've been thinking about moving to Boston, he admitted. Evelyn's eyes widened. What? Not immediately, but I've been researching schools for Emma, looking at job opportunities, trying to figure out if it's possible. Because 18 months of missing you has made it pretty clear that I don't want to keep doing this. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wasn't sure yet. Because moving Emma away from Chicago means leaving Sarah's parents, leaving the city where her mother is buried, asking a 7-year-old to start over because her dad fell in love with someone who lives somewhere else. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. I needed to know it was the right choice before I said anything. And is it? I don't know. I thought I had more time to figure it out. And now you're telling me you might move back here. And I don't know if that makes it easier or more complicated. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing. Can I ask you something? Evelyn's voice was quiet. Why were you planning to move to Boston instead of asking me to come back to Chicago? Because Boston is your success story. You built that office from nothing. I didn't want to be the reason you gave it up. But you were willing to give up Chicago for me? Chicago is just a city. Daniel struggled for words. You're the person who makes me want to stop just surviving and start actually living again. That's worth relocating for. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. That's the most romantic and most frustrating thing you've ever said to me. Why frustrating? Because you were planning this huge sacrifice without talking to me about it. We're supposed to be partners, Daniel. That means making big decisions together, not independently deciding who gets to give up what. She was right. Daniel had been so focused on protecting Evelyn's career and Emma's stability that he'd forgotten about the partnership part. Okay, he said. So let's make this decision together. What do you actually want? Not what's practical or what makes sense for the company. What does Evelyn Carter want? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to wake up in the same city as you. I want to see Emma's piano recital in person instead of over video chat. I want to have dinner together on random Tuesdays, not just special weekends we've planned for weeks. I want normal and boring and everyday, not just the highlight reel of long distance. Then take the Chicago job. Just like that? Just like that. Daniel moved closer. You've proven everything you needed to prove in Boston. You built a successful office, earned your promotion, showed everyone who doubted you that you're brilliant at what you do. Coming back to Chicago isn't giving up. It's coming home. What about Emma? If I'm here full-time, that changes things for her too. Changes our relationship from Dad's friend who visits sometimes to something more permanent. Emma asked tonight if you'd be my official girlfriend when you moved back. I think she's ready for permanent. Evelyn laughed through tears. She asked that? She's been ready for us to figure this out since that first dinner. We're the ones who've been taking forever to catch up. So if I take this job, if I move back to Chicago, what does that look like for us? Daniel took her hand, finally closing the distance he'd been maintaining. It looks like actual dates, not just airport visits. It looks like you meeting Sarah's parents and being part of Emma's daily life, not just the fun weekend person. It looks like fighting about stupid things like whose turn it is to do dishes instead of just missing each other from 1,200 miles away. That sounds messy. Probably. But I'm tired of clean and simple. I want messy and real. Evelyn kissed him then, soft and certain, and Daniel felt 18 months of distance start to close. I'll take the job, she said against his lips. I'll come home. Yeah? Yeah. She pulled back to look at him. But we're doing this right. I want to meet Emma's grandparents. I want family dinners and school pickups and all the boring normal stuff that makes a relationship real. No more protected distance. Just us figuring it out together. Together, Daniel agreed. They spent the rest of the weekend planning what Evelyn's return would actually look like. She'd need to give Boston 8 weeks' notice to properly transition her replacement. She'd need to find an apartment in Chicago. Though Daniel noticed she looked at places near his neighborhood, not across the city. They'd need to tell Emma properly, make sure she understood what this change meant. On Sunday, before Evelyn flew back to Boston, they sat Emma down for a real conversation. I'm moving back to Chicago, Evelyn told her, in about 2 months, and your dad and I are going to be dating, like, officially, which means you'll see me a lot more. How do you feel about that? Emma looked between them seriously. Will you come to my piano recital? I wouldn't miss it. Will you still remember that I don't like bananas? Always. Will you make my dad less sad? Evelyn's voice caught. I'll try my best. Emma nodded, apparently satisfied. Okay then, can we get pancakes now? Daniel laughed because leave it to a 7-year-old to handle major life changes and immediately pivot to breakfast. The next 8 weeks crawled by in a blur of logistics and anticipation. Evelyn wrapped up in Boston, training her replacement and saying goodbye to the office she'd built. Daniel prepared his apartment for Evelyn to be a regular presence, which mostly meant cleaning out closet space and accepting that his life was about to get significantly less simple. Emma counted down the days on her calendar, marking each one with careful precision. When Evelyn finally returned to Chicago for good, Daniel and Emma picked her up from the airport with a handmade welcome home sign that Emma had decorated with approximately 1 million stickers. You're really back, Daniel said, pulling her into his arms while Emma danced around them with the sign. I'm really back. Evelyn looked around O'Hare like she was seeing it for the first time. I spent 18 months missing this city and didn't realize how much until right now. You were missing Chicago or you were missing us? Both. Definitely both. They helped Evelyn move into her new apartment, a 2-bedroom in Lincoln Park, close enough to Daniel's place that Emma could bike between them. It wasn't as fancy as her old Gold Coast apartment, but it felt more like her. Lived in. Real. The first month of Evelyn being back was an adjustment. They had their first real fight about Daniel's tendency to avoid conflict, which led to a productive, if uncomfortable, conversation about communication styles. They navigated the awkwardness of Evelyn meeting Sarah's parents, who were gracious and kind and told Daniel they were happy he was moving forward. Sarah would have liked her, Emma's grandmother said, watching Evelyn help Emma with homework at the kitchen table. She always said you needed someone who wouldn't let you hide behind being fine when you weren't. Daniel had cried in the car after that visit, and Evelyn held his hand and didn't try to fix it, just let him feel what he needed to feel. Emma's piano recital arrived in May, and Evelyn sat in the audience between Daniel and Sarah's parents, recording on her phone while Emma played her piece with only 2 small mistakes. Afterward, Emma ran to all of them for hugs, and Evelyn caught Daniel's eye over Emma's head. This was family. Complicated and reconstructed, and not what Daniel had imagined 8 years ago when he married Sarah, but real and good, and worth every hard conversation that had gotten them here. That night, after Emma was asleep, Evelyn and Daniel sat on his couch drinking wine and processing the day. Your in-laws really are lovely, Evelyn said. They are. Sarah's mom told me today that she's glad I found you. How do you feel about that? Daniel considered the question. For 3 years after Sarah's death, he'd felt guilty every time he smiled, like happiness was a betrayal. But somewhere in the past 2 years, that guilt had transformed into something else. Not gone, grief never really left, but integrated. Sarah's memory didn't have to compete with his future. Both could exist. I feel like I'm finally doing what Sarah asked me to do before she died, he said quietly. Emma told me once that Sarah made her promise to make sure I didn't stay sad forever. I think this is what she meant. Evelyn leaned against him. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, you're not Sarah 2.0. You're Evelyn, and I love you for completely different reasons than I loved her. That's okay. It's allowed to be different. What are those reasons? The ones that are completely different? Daniel smiled. You're bossy and intense, and you remember ridiculous details about people's lives because you actually care. You drink your coffee black with 1 sugar, and you change Thai food orders for a 6-year-old's peanut allergy you'd never met. You built a company from nothing because you refused to accept that women can't do what men do. You fell in love with a grieving widower and waited 2 years to tell him because you put his well-being before your feelings. I sound exhausting. You are. In the best way. Daniel kissed her forehead. You make me want to be better, not because I'm broken and you're fixing me, but because you see potential in me that I forgot was there. You were never broken. You were grieving. There's a difference. I know that now. You taught me that. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daniel thought about the path that had brought them here. From that night in Evelyn's office, when she'd confessed feelings he hadn't known she had, through 18 months of distance and doubt, to this moment on his couch where everything felt settled in a way it hadn't in years. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in November, Daniel woke up to Emma jumping on his bed. Daddy, Miss Carter made pancakes and she says we can eat them in our pajamas. Daniel stumbled into the kitchen to find Evelyn at the stove, wearing one of his old sweatshirts and making a stack of pancakes that would feed a small army. She'd stayed over more nights than not in the past few months, and her presence in his apartment had stopped feeling like visiting and started feeling like home. "You made pancakes," he said, still half asleep. "I did. Emma requested them. I'm following orders." Emma was already at the table with syrup and butter, chattering about her friend Sophie's upcoming birthday party. Evelyn served pancakes and sat down across from Daniel, and he looked at the two of them and felt something click into place. This was what happiness looked like after loss. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real and present and worth fighting for. Later that day, while Emma was at Sophie's party, Daniel took Evelyn to the park where he'd scattered some of Sarah's ashes 4 years ago. It was the first time he'd brought her here, to this specific place that had felt too sacred to share. "I wanted you to see this," he said, standing by the bench where he used to sit when the grief was too heavy to carry home to Emma. "This is where I came when I needed to feel close to Sarah after she died." Evelyn was quiet, letting him lead. "I used to come here and talk to her. Tell her about Emma's milestones, about work stress, about how terrified I was that I was failing at single parenthood." Daniel sat on the bench, and Evelyn sat beside him. "I haven't been here in over a year, not because I forgot about Sarah, but because I didn't need this place anymore. I found other ways to carry her with me." "What changed?" "You." "Emma growing up, time." Daniel took Evelyn's hand. "I used to think moving forward meant leaving Sarah behind. But it doesn't. She's part of my story, part of who I am, part of why I'm capable of loving you the way I do. I learned how to be a good partner with her. She taught me that love means seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway. She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. And she'd like you. She'd appreciate that you don't try to erase her or compete with her memory. That you love Emma like she's worth loving, not just as an extension of me." Evelyn's eyes were bright with tears. "I do love her. I love both of you, this whole complicated, beautiful situation we've built." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, and Evelyn's breath caught. "I know we've only been officially together for 8 months. I know this is fast by most people's standards, but we've actually been building toward this for almost 3 years, and I'm done waiting for the perfect moment." Daniel opened the box to show a simple ring, elegant and understated, exactly Evelyn's style. "I love you. Emma loves you. You make our weird little family feel complete in a way I didn't know we needed. Marry me. Move in officially instead of just staying over most nights. Help me raise Emma and build a life that's ours, not just mine with you visiting." Evelyn was crying now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. That was possibly the least romantic proposal in history. "Is that a no?" "That's a yes, you idiot. Obviously it's a yes." She kissed him, laughing and crying at the same time. "I've been waiting for you to ask for months. I even looked at rings online in case you needed hints." "Did you really?" "I screenshot one to Marcus and asked if he thought you'd like it. He told me to be patient and let you do it in your own time." Daniel laughed. "Marcus knew I was planning this. I asked him to help me pick the ring. We're both terrible at secrets." "Apparently." They sat on that bench for another hour, talking about wedding plans and living arrangements and how to tell Emma. Evelyn wanted something small and simple, just family and close friends. Daniel agreed because he'd done the big wedding before, and what mattered now was the commitment, not the ceremony. When they picked up Emma from the birthday party, she took one look at Evelyn's hand and squealed, "You're getting married! I knew it! Sophie's mom owes me $5. "You bet on this?" Daniel asked. "Sophie said you were too scared to propose. I said you'd do it before Christmas. Pay up, Daddy." Daniel handed Emma $5, while Evelyn tried not to laugh, and they drove home as a family that was about to become official. The wedding happened 3 months later in February, small and simple, in the same park where Daniel had proposed. Emma was the flower girl, wearing a dress she'd picked herself and carrying a bouquet almost as big as she was. Sarah's parents came, and Evelyn's mother flew in from Seattle, and Marcus served as best man while making terrible jokes about workplace romance. When Daniel and Evelyn exchanged vows, he promised to love her loudly instead of quietly, to build a life with her instead of beside her, to trust that healing wasn't betrayal and moving forward wasn't forgetting. Evelyn promised to see him on his worst days and love him anyway, to be a partner to him and a steady presence for Emma. to build something new while honoring what came before. Emma stood between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands, and when the officiant pronounced them married, she cheered louder than anyone. They moved into a new house in March, bigger than Daniel's apartment, with a yard for the dog Emma had been requesting for years, and a home office for Evelyn's late nights. Emma got her own room, decorated exactly how she wanted, and they created space for Sarah's memory without letting it dominate their present. One night several months after the wedding, Daniel found Evelyn in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I was just thinking about that first dinner. When you brought Emma and I was terrified I'd say the wrong thing or she'd hate me or you'd realize this was all a mistake." Evelyn leaned against him. "And now she's my daughter too, in all the ways that matter. I get to be here for homework struggles and piano recitals and teaching her that women can build companies and change tires and do anything men can do. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have both of you." Evelyn turned to look at him. "Thank you for being brave enough to try, for not letting fear win. Thank you for loving me before I knew I needed it, for being patient while I figured out how to love you back." They stood there in the doorway of their daughter's room, in the house they'd chosen together, building a life that honored the past while embracing the future. Years later, when people asked how they met, Daniel would tell them about the worst blind date of his life and the office confession that changed everything. Evelyn would add details about coffee orders and Thai food and falling in love with a man who was too busy surviving to notice. Emma, whenever she was around to hear the story, would roll her eyes and say they made it sound way more complicated than it actually was. "You loved each other," she'd say with teenage exasperation. "You just took forever to admit it." And she was right, because the truth was, love had been there all along, in the quiet moments of noticing and caring, in the small acts of kindness that built a foundation neither of them realized they were constructing. Daniel had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about integrating it into a future that had room for both grief and joy, for old love and new, for the person he'd been and the person he was becoming. Evelyn had learned that strength wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about being vulnerable enough to admit when you didn't, brave enough to ask for what you needed, and patient enough to let love develop in its own time. And Emma, wise beyond her years, had learned that family came in all shapes, built from loss and love, from choosing each other every day, from showing up even when it was hard. On quiet mornings when Daniel made coffee, black with 1 sugar for both of them, and Evelyn sat at the kitchen table reviewing project files while Emma practiced piano in the next room, he'd think about that night in her office, about 5 devastating words that had changed everything. "She can't love you like I do." Evelyn had been right. Nobody else could love him quite like she did, with patience and fierceness, with understanding and challenge, with the kind of attention that said you matter, and I see you, and I'm not going anywhere. And Daniel had learned to love her the same way, loudly, presently, with the full knowledge that love after loss looked different than love before, and that was okay. It was allowed to be different. It was allowed to be better in some ways, harder in others, and entirely its own thing. Because at the end of the day, the best kind of love wasn't the kind that saved you. It was the kind that saw you clearly, all your mess and grief and complicated history, and chose to build something new anyway. That was what they'd done. What they kept doing every morning, every argument, every small moment of choosing each other. And it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And after years of just surviving, real was everything Daniel needed.